All right, great. Hi, Kate.
Hi, Michelle. We made it here.
Made it. We made it. Thank goodness. So I got a question for you. Do you ever wonder what's going on down there?
I wonder what's going on down there, and I think a lot of women wonder what's going on down there. And these are the conversations that more of us want to be having. We just don't know where to turn in information overload. These are conversations we talk about. We just forget that we're not recording anything and just have these chats while we're together or sending messages to each other. But it's the question of womanhood. What's going on down there?
And, exploring those taboo topics too, like, oh God, do I want to say this out loud? Does this happen to you too? So I think that's what we're going to try to address here today on our call. Anything that has to do with, in Chinese medicine, what we call like a damp presentation. But really, what that means to you is do you have any pelvic congestion or pelvic inflammatory um, disorders, experiences that you have? And that's what we want to cover here today, right? Something like that.
And Michelle and I, for many years, we've been so blessed to work alongside of each other in the same building in different facets and have collaborated a great deal over the past few years. But so much of what we see, there's an underlying tone with women that something is wrong with them. They're too embarrassed to ask the questions. And there's this quiet, silent, acute suffering that goes on when it feels, and also the shame. I find that there's a lot of shame when a woman feels like, okay, this is happening, but I don't know what to do. And so we stuff it down, we stuff it down. And so in our
Mm-hmm.
conversation today, it's really bringing to light some common, I don't even want to use the word symptoms. I would like to use the word messengers from the body as to what might be contributing to imbalance or a disconnect within the pelvis, and then looking at our bodies as a whole.
Yeah, that's great. Because I think too, what we also have seen in both of our practices is that everybody's contributing factors to these clues and these messages that we get from our bodies will have a different root. So I think it's great that you even bring up shame and guilt because those are two emotions that actually settle into the pelvic cavity. And then we hold on from there. I mean, that's why, right? They call it Pandora's box, right? It's like, it's the place that actually is probably controlling a lot in how we react and also interact in the world. Yet it's a scary, dark place. And, or it can be perceived as that, as a scary, dark place. And, a lot of us sometimes walk around as if we don't have that lower half of us because of that shame or that guilt. But there's more than just emotions that contribute to these clues that we get from our bodies. Obviously this can, you know, um, these quote unquote disorders can arise from more than just the emotional body. They can be caused from, having a baby, right? Having some kind of pelvic surgery. It can come from injuries like a car accident or a fall. It can come from today, Kate and I were even looking at how wearing really tight clothing, like Spanx. We were all so crazy about Spanx for so long, and how it could actually come from a physiological fascia that's really tight, right? So we all have different root causes. But today we would like to really just throw out different ways that we see this presented, and then maybe that will prompt you to want to take this a little further.
And maybe viewing our bodies in a way that there's this tree with all these different root systems stemming out, and the branches have so much potential to blossom and bloom, but sometimes we don't realize how it's all intertwined from above, from below. And factors that sometimes we overlook. We overlook because they've been occurring for so long that we never put an aspect together that they might be compromising the body or destabilizing. And especially I find, so we're here in late summer in a very humid climate. And as we go through the seasons, our bodies do shift. And sometimes symptoms, the messengers, are more prominent and they speak more loudly in the body. And other times, okay, they actually, that doesn't bother me anymore. It's dormant. But it also could be seasonally looking at when we have more stress in our lives and in our bodies, and could that be accentuating different experiences? So just to kind of start the conversation, Michelle, I'd be curious, when you said dampness, um, what does that look like in terms of how it manifests within the pelvis of a woman's body? What would you say that shows up?
That's a good question, right? Because we can have dampness anywhere in our body, and we're very complex human beings. So we could have dampness in the pelvic region, but like dryness in our lungs. So your specific question about what is how does dampness actually present in the pelvis? That will look like ovarian cysts, fibroids, endometriosis, pelvic inflammatory diseases, scar tissue buildup. And then if the woman is menstruating, it will look like the period blood could actually look a little mucusy.
Mm.
It could be thick, clotty. There'll be pain involved. There'll be a heavy down bearing sensation. You could feel that in the actual pelvis, but again, a symptom, a message that a lot of women don't like to talk about, but, and this, let's get into it. Do you ever feel like your labia feels really heavy and like achy? Again, like I can remember especially like in my younger bleeding years, that used to happen to me a lot. And I'd be like, that part of my vagina really hurts. Like the labia actually feels like it's been lifting weights all day. You know? And then there's this like, whew, whoa, that was a crazy workout. I didn't even realize that part of my body could feel heavy. It's not that large of a skin area. So why does it feel like it's carrying a 10-pound weight? So dampness is this drawing down, and I call it like the saggy, baggy elephant. It's that feeling of, and we could actually feel this throughout the legs too. If we have any kind of pelvic congestion, any dampness in the pelvic region, it's most likely going to affect our legs too. So it's going to make us feel like we're walking through water. Even my mom and I were out for a walk not that long ago. And she said and my mom typically doesn't have much of a damp presentation. She would, if anything, she would run more like dry, right? But she even said to me, God, my legs, I'm really struggling walking today. I feel like I'm really carrying a lot of extra weight in my lower half of the body. Those are signs of dampness. And, like you said, Kate, it depends on the season. And because we're in that late earth, where right now the medicine of earth is around us and within us, it's not uncommon to have this damp presentation. It's just like, the wet towel, right? That we were swimming all day and we didn't take care of the wet towel. So now it's just sitting there, right? And we got to take it in. There's a heavy quality to dampness.
That makes a lot of sense. And again, thinking of the local climate that we are in. As you were saying that, I was actually picturing a couple of clients that come in here to the office and will note how much sciatic pain they notice in the summertime. And they're different ages. And so sometimes I wonder what's happening with their ovarian health as they're cycling. But other times it's like, what else is pulling and creating that dampness? The pelvic area is quite compressed with everything that's happening in there, yet such a mainstream hub for the communication downward. So it makes sense with what you're saying, the legs, the hips, circulation. skeletal system and how it radiates outward into the body. And if
Yeah.
something has been there for a long time, there's more energy to it, that it's been rooted for quite a bit of time for that density to build and build.
Mhm. And I love that you brought up the sciatica piece too, because the sacrum and the pelvic area, right? Like one's just the front, one's just the back. And, even as a Chinese medicine practitioner, if a woman comes in and she's looking to get treated for, say, pelvic inflammatory disease, it might even be too sensitive in the area for me to actually go there. So I'll treat the sacrum, you know? And that's why a lot of us do have, like, even when we're bleeding, we'll say, gosh, my lower back hurts. Like it's all in I feel it in my hips, it's not just the uterus, you know, it's not just the ovaries, right? It's not just the labia. There's so, like, it's the hips, it's the sacrum, it's the legs. Like, this is all, it's never just like one symptom or one section of the body. All of this plays a role. And that is why when we're looking at, any discomfort within the pelvic region, we actually have to move the lymph, right? And Kate, this is your shtick, right? So, um, perhaps maybe you can even just give us a couple of easy remedies that we can do to move the lymph in the lower part of the body.
I love that you're bringing this up because lymph is everything and it runs through our entire body. And we often think, okay, if we have something that's built up in the body, we spend a lot of time sitting, whether we're at a computer or in the car, there's not a lot of flow happening. And what naturally happens when we move our lymph, we get the blood flow moving back up towards the heart. But if we're stagnant, even after resting and sleeping overnight, we stand up, everything feels a bit stiff. Or this, I noticed in myself over a number of years, and with clients, they'll say, I went to bed, my cycle wasn't that heavy, my bleed wasn't that heavy, and I stood up, and all of a sudden everything, it just was like this deluge of blood flow. But we want to be moving. So lymph loves natural pumping, walking, standing in place, bending just slightly at the knees. Naturally, that gets about 80% of this lymphatic pump moving through the body. Some things that feel like they're big trends, but naturally occurring, swimming. Swimming as a way of just getting that body to open and to move in that way. The rebounder. Rebounder is a simple tool that is understated in the way that we don't need to be a gymnast and do these fancy tricks. You don't even need to be lifting your feet, and they have stabilizer bars that you can bounce, you can move, or doing that on the earth. I'm sitting in the office here and I'm just looking right over at the Flowpresso, which was a genius creation. For many years, people have been familiar with the Normatec, working with isolating parts of the body with that compression. We often think of that when someone's had surgery and they're bedbound for a while. We want to keep that lymph moving. But the Flowpresso is a whole bodysuit, and it's a one-way system up towards the heart combined with the infrared heat. And infrared heat is another lymph loving practice.
Huh.
We've had, I think, how many times you've probably sat in the sauna? Hundreds of times. But knowing that the infrared sauna is such a dynamic piece, that these tools that we customize to work for us. Some people are much more sensitive to heat, so maybe that wouldn't be the best thing for an extended period of time. But looking at practices that we can do at home, that we can insource, we can bring in very gentle ways, tapping, things we are naturally doing, maybe not even realizing, oh, I'm warming myself up, but no, we're getting the blood flow, doing a little belly massage, or actually experiencing the Arvigo, the Maya abdominal therapy, which is such a tremendous support for, if anyone is unfamiliar with that, really what that is a massage therapy intended for the lower belly, but intended for thinking in terms of digestion, pelvic health. The basis of it is looking at the position of the uterus or where the uterus was. And if she's pressing forward, if she's pressing back, if she's pressing on nerves, that can really cause some interference with blood flow, with lymph, cause more congestion. We look at how adhesions can form with scar tissue over years. But learning to do a practice like that on our own and also outsourcing and going to have that done is a phenomenal way of really working with the lymph.
Well, I love everything that you mentioned there. And those are really simple practices to incorporate too, and they don't necessarily cost that much either, if at all. But like you were right though, like every body is going to be different, right? So we're going to tailor your treatment protocol, if you will, based on specific needs of your body, right? Because even I know from a Chinese medicine perspective, we're talking damp, but there's damp cold and there's damp heat, right? So that's also like, that's what kind of like, you know, made like a little aha moment because you said like not everybody tolerates heat, right? So that's why, if you are more of a damp cold presentation, you'll feel better with pressure, with warmth, that heating pad. But if you're more of a damp heat, you're going to wear like looser clothing. You're going to gravitate towards like foods and drink that are more like cold in nature. You're going to tolerate more raw foods, right? So everybody has a different constitution. And that is why, especially when you see, you go in for a session with Kate, or you've seen me in the past too, it's specific to you. Everybody's pelvis has a different terrain. So, we want to make sure, and that I think is what separates us too. We're not trying to throw like a blanketed, hey, this is how you're going to deal with your fibroids, your ovarian cysts. We encourage you that if you want to go deeper with this, Kate and I are offering, it's almost like a 2-on-1 call where you can have a consultation with both of us at the same time. And we can really get down to like pinpoint specific exercises, specific herbs, specific oils for you. But today we're just giving a broad generalization that like, hey, like calling all ladies who have fibroids, ovarian cysts, endometriosis, you've given birth to a baby, this is for you. This is what we're trying to bring more attention to, right? Kate, what would be some of your favorite herbs that you might use in something like this?
Going back to the lymph to keep the channels open, I would say nettle. Nettle is the first one for most people. And of course, yes, it would depend if someone has a sensitivity. Though I've never really met someone that has a sensitivity to nettle. But she is just such a loving herb that really does open the channels, but she offers a sense of adding extra minerals to the body. And that's where I've had such a mixed relationship with focusing on the nutrition piece over time because we're inundated and this is a little side note, but that's really what brought my deeper devotion into pelvic care because I studied nutrition. I went to what was at one point the most credible natural medicine school in the country. And I thought I had a really strong dialed in perspective. Everything was coming through my brain. I was studying, I was practicing, yet there was such a disconnect in my body where I did develop cysts on my ovaries and my cycles were very erratic. I was not seeing red blood at all. It was more brown, stagnant flow. At that point, I didn't understand the lymphatic system. And it took meeting with a naturopath 20 years ago, and she said, we're not tuning into how much in the way of emotional connection that there is in the body. And that was really the catalyst to understand we could be taking in so much information through our brains, but it's the opportunity to take that down and to integrate. Does this actually resonate? Is it more physical manual work that I need? Is it more that I'm so depleted and I need to build up my mineral store? I'm deficient. I've been a vegan for years, but my body deeply needs those animal fats and proteins to restore. Is there a deep gut dysbiosis, an imbalance where there's a depletion, there's a bacterial overgrowth of bacteria that might not be so healthy, and the body is working really hard, the immune system is tired. So adding that into that very long-winded explanation in terms of a go-to herb, I would lean on nettle, but it would really depend on woman to woman. And sometimes we can really overdo it. We can think, we can think our way into, I'm taking this every day, I'm doing this every day, I'm mixing this into my coffee, I'm mixing this into my tea, I do my smoothie, but yet the body does not even want that. So
Mhm.
herbs are just like essential oils, what the body needs, what it's responding to, and letting the body really dictate the cadence of what we're taking in. One of the pieces that I find with when you named those components of fibroids and endometriosis, and even with cysts, which now we understand on a deeper level, this metabolic connection. Very often there is a deficiency on one level, but then where that's coming from, the liver. The liver is so tired and taxed from environmental exposures. We could be eating a very clean, organic diet, but yet we're still living, breathing beings with these pores that are exposed to water, that are exposed to personal care products, that we drive by a construction site and we take in those fumes and they move into our body. Everything moves through the liver. And for most women living in America, we are navigating estrogen overload. And what does that mean? It means that the liver is not processing and eliminating the estrogen. So it's being stored in places where it doesn't need to be stored. And then the downstream effect of there's this fibroid growth, these non-cancerous growths around within the uterus. The endometriosis is basically overgrowth of tissue that should be within the uterus right around, but I've had clients that have had it growing all the way up their torso that they've actually, 35 years old, a woman had to experience a hysterectomy, but then they went in and they had to cut it as high through her torso. So these unusual ways, but the body is really trying to clear it out, but where extra growth, where congestion builds up, and a lot of that comes down to the liver. So drainage, how can we open that? Liver-loving herbs, bitters, to open those pathways, to gently say, we're just going to allow you to exhale what doesn't need to be there. There's a lot to that, and thank you for riding that whole wave. But there's so much when we think of an herb. Can it be an ally? But can it be an ally in a bigger picture within the body and what it can support, where it can support?
And where, yeah. Yeah, I think I know from like, again, like through the lens of Chinese medicine too, the gut and the pelvis and like our sexual organs are, they're so connected. So a lot of pelvic care can actually be rooted in being aware of your digestion. And I think bringing up the liver is probably the most important out of like all the digestive organs. I mean, hey, the liver loves to detox, you know? So we always say that it's like that's the liver's job, you know, where that like the heart wants to feel things and feel connected and have presence. The liver's like, can you give me something to detox? So, having supportive herbs and also exercise, right? Because in Chinese medicine, the liver and the gallbladder, they're like a brother-sister pair. They rule our sinews, our tendons, the muscles of the body. So a lot of us sometimes kind of forget that exercise is actually very important to our menstrual cycles, you know, and also knowing when you're in the season of maybe doing more like rigorous weightlifting exercises versus something a little bit softer, like maybe a yin yoga class or a gentle walk, right? Um, Nothing should ever stay the same. And especially if you're a menstruating woman, your week to week should look very different in terms of how you're moving your body, the amount of rest that you're getting, and what you're feeding itself, right? So, there is a lot to talk about, and there's many different ways that you can come at this too, which is kind of nice. You know, it's like you don't have to follow just one protocol, right? You could borrow from a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of this.
Mm-hmm.
I know from like my perspective in terms of essential oils, like I'll always go to geranium rose when it comes to pelvic congestion. But then going back to wanting to be a little bit more personal, having more personalized care, a combination of maybe like May Chong, cypress, and juniper berry would be really great for someone who's more cold damp, right? So that's the type of woman when she gets her period, she doesn't want to do much. She wants to lay in bed with the heating pad and binge on Netflix. Where, I might have another client that comes in whose menstrual cycle looks a little different from that. And they notice that they need to move more, and have more maybe like postures in yoga to help open up their hips. Um, like they actually do better with a little bit of tapping, and giving themselves a little bit of a massage. So yeah, there's so many different essential oils that go directly to the pelvis, and then from there they make their way in and then start to address specific symptomology.
Mm.
I think it's also important to notice too that like we ovulate on different sides of the body, right? So maybe 1 month looks very different from the next month. And so I know even for myself, like sometimes I think, oh gosh, like I have cloudy periods. And then the next month I don't have cloudy periods. So then I think that that's not a problem anymore. But then it comes back, So I think the best thing that we can do as women is just listen and pause. Take that time to say, like, what exactly is going down? What is happening down below?
What is happening and when it's happening, tracking of some sort of looking at, okay, what's happening in life around me? Am I in a very in a state of deep stress,
Mhm.
whatever that stress might be coming through? Has there been a lot of travel? Has there been a lot of transition and change? Has it been a very restful and relaxing season where there's been spaciousness, but to notice, but we're very quick to forget. Do you find it's like, oh yeah, everything's good this month, and then next month something happens, or in pelvic digestion, a different component, different way of communication. It's like, oh, when did that happen? But and we don't have to get crazy with all the Bluetooth apps and the tracking of rings and watches that we're wearing, but even just a note in our phone or having a dedicated journal that we keep. I'm an advocate for women keeping a little book by their bedside and just noticing. It's like, even if they've read a word of an emotion that's been so dominant. Okay. I remember in a recent conversation we were having, and you were talking about your hormones and your body, and all of a sudden it dawned on you, it's like, wait a minute, I've integrated this oil relationship with the combo. But again, we're busy. We have a lot of tabs that we are moving in different directions. But if we can offer these moments of presence to attune what's shifted, what's changed.
Well, I think that's like actually a really good point to bring up too, because you could be working on a different part of your body. But especially as women, like our uterus is, what do you say, Kate? Like our second heart or second brain or something like that?
Second heart.
Yeah. So it's like, I think about what I had shared with Kate was that I created an essential oil blend to be placing on my foot arch treatments. And I do this practice morning and night. Now, I developed this blend because I was trying to target my digestion. I had noticed I started to gain a little bit of weight, and I was thinking, ooh, is this like estrogen toxicosis? Like I'm noticing that I'm gaining weight in the different places that I don't normally. So let me put a blend together that's going to help drain dampness and curb some of my sugar cravings. Um, and help me like with my relationship with food instead of, like I tend to be somebody who kind of waits to the last minute and then my belly is growling and then I go for quick fixes. And gosh, we all know that that's never a good way of taking care of ourselves, right? We need nourishing, slow cooked meals. But I make this blend to help with digestion. And then last month's period, I was like, okay, that was very different. I went from a 27-day cycle to now it was 23 days. Like, why is that happening? And I started making it a problem, right? And this was the other thing that Kate and I were talking about, like, especially as women, when something goes wrong down there, it's like, or wrong down there, You're like, oh God, what is that? Now what is it? And so I started to spiral a little bit and I thought, oh my gosh, this is really something must be up, because now my cycle came 5 days early. And then we were thinking about it and I'm like, wait, it's that essential oil blend that I've been working with. And there's heavy duty, like essential oils in that blend that drain dampness. So no wonder my period came early. I'm in the process of draining, right? I'm not in this process of trying to estringe and hold on to anything. I'm in this process of like, what can I let go of? So of course, then my period came early. And with it, things that I want to let go of, right? And dampness, again, like not only can it show up as, like these little, accumulations of cysts or fibroids or whatever, but it can come from a mental place. Like, so if, and I had noticed in the beginning of summer, I was ruminating, right? And I kept playing over the same stories, right? Or a conversation kept going back to that. Dampness like creates this inability to act. So I'm not surprised that on a physiological level, by draining dampness, my body was acting, right? So with that comes blood. It wasn't like, let's hold on to the blood, let's hold it, let's hold it, let's hold it, let's hold it. No, I created that intention that said, I want to let this go. I want to drain this out. Mm-hmm. And that's also something important to note too, is that when we are going through this and you're choosing to address certain clues in the body, that then maybe the period is heavier. Maybe it is clottier. Maybe it is more painful. That doesn't mean that something's wrong, right? Especially, you have to like continue to like remind yourself, oh, but I'm doing this. I'm taking this herb, right?
Or doing some kind of therapeutic approach, mind, body, spirit, when we think of all the layers, that there's some transaction happening where there's movement.
And we want change, right? Like that's what we want. And I think like sometimes during the healing process, we think that we're only going to start to feel better because we're finally addressing it. But it's almost like things actually can get worse before it clears. So again, like just reminding ourselves that we've signed up to do something about it. How our body's going to react to our support and maybe the herbs that we're bringing in, the lifestyle that we're changing, the essential oils that we're working on. Essentially, we are asking for change. So that is what is happening, right? It might not look or feel the way that we want, but we're inviting in change. And that is what's important.
Naturally, as you say that, it's like picturing what coherence is. It's how everything just finds its natural flow in harmony. Mm-hmm. And we live in such a culture where we force that and we rush that and we override nature's rhythm. But the body's innate wisdom is to move with coherence. And there is a recalibration period where some things are heavier. There's more depletion. There's more of a drainage or a detox response. And then other times there's more of a rebuilding. But especially as women, where we have these sacred fluids that we can watch in our bleeding years of blood and cervical fluid, and the remembrance after those years are complete, we're still cycling with the moon. It's just a different manifestation, how it's coming through our creativity, how it's coming through our sleep, how it's coming through the ways that we nourish ourselves and move through nourishing our tribes and our villages. We're just not seeing the blood come through, but it's really letting our bodies be held by nature and trusting that nature doesn't rush, and it's not going to be a 24-hour fix, and it's not going to be this. If it is, there'll be a longer recovery and a dig out with that. And that's something I like to encourage clients when they are coming off birth control, especially if it's been very, very long years or decades where they've been on it. Typically, there's a depletion of B vitamins. There's a level that maybe they notice more patterns of anxiety or depression that weren't always there, but it's almost like their body's starting to become more of a receptor and coming into its own rhythm. But to give, especially if there's a focus, someone coming off birth control and then wanting to focus on her fertility season,
Mm-hmm.
give it at least a season, at least 4 months to let the body build up those minerals before even thinking about hosting another being. But or we think of a woman who's undergone surgery. No, and after a C-section, not getting up and walking around within a very short period of time, and the compression that moves through the body before the tissues have a chance to heal, and the tendons, and giving birth, any kind of birth, the opening and the closing of the bones. And so it's a beautiful, beautiful gift to be in these bodies of ours. And it's also, with that comes the responsibility, I find, of cultivating more self-compassion and patience with our bodies. And not, and this is a practice of a lifetime, but the ticker tape of carrying the stories that something's wrong with us, that all of a sudden, this is no, it's just we're working to find that way back to coherence and letting the body share what it needs and what it doesn't need. Because we know the emotional and the energetic connections of the impact when there has been a lot of ovarian cyst growth. Well, what kind of creative expression is not happening in life? What kind of sensual expression, relating sensuality living through our senses is stagnant, and dampness has occurred because there's no vitality that's moving through. With fibroids and endometriosis, a lot of that can be contributed and growing with autoimmune. But what is autoimmune? It's really the disconnection of communication from within and outside our world, and how everything works together. What we've been swallowing down, what we've been holding versus what we've been allowing to be expressed.
Right.
It's like the oversaturation. When you said dampness, immediately it was like, okay, we're saturated. We have nowhere else to go except build this slow muck that's just here.
No.
And in time, what happens? The sun comes out and starts to warm everything up, and then this process of evaporation,
Yep. Drying
airing
it out.
out, drying out, and new life can start to move again.
Right. And I think what we can like close on here too is like a reminder to just be curious instead of judgmental. And that, whatever goes on down there is actually, it's what makes us a woman, and this is our powerhouse. So let's treat it as such. And instead, because it's so easy for us to go, oh no, like I had painful periods. Oh, it's another this. Like, it's easy for us to get wrapped in what is wrong and then get really caught up in trying to make it right. But perhaps we can add to the conversation what is going well, what does feel good, because that will also lead us to ways that we then self-treat, you know, and addressing even some of those deeper emotions, like we said, of shame and guilt. It's like, I think for women, and I think Kate could probably speak on this a little bit more, but like we're seen as such sexual beings, and yet we're also shunned because of that, right? So it's like you're damned if you do, damned if you don't sort of thing. So we might as well focus on what is going well, right? Without, of course, like, because understanding what isn't is also giving us really good diagnostic information. But we can also lead our decision making with like the lens of seeing what is going well, like let that lead us into the treatment protocol, if that makes sense, right? So it's like when you sit down with your practitioner and they say, well, what does feel good? Oh, I feel really good when I'm on my rebounder. Okay, do more of that, right?
Mhm.
And again, you might find out like an essential oil, say geranium, right? And someone says to you, oh, you should work with geranium because that helps to drain dampness out of the pelvis. Well, what happens if as you're starting to work with that, something else pops up? And then you think, I don't know, do I get, like, especially I'll say this without trying to sound too confusing. When I give my patients an oil to work with. And I say, okay, I want you to go home and work with geranium rose morning and night for 30 days. Put it on your foot arches. They're like, okay. Maybe by 2.5 weeks, I get a little note back from them and they're like, I fell off. I'm not really doing that much anymore. Instead of making that a problem, get curious and say, maybe I don't need it anymore. Maybe that's my body saying, we're good. Try a different herb, try a different oil, try a different exercise, right? So, I think part of what Kate and I are trying to do within these conversations here about women's health is to switch our mindset. Instead of asking what is wrong, what's going on down there, we ask ourselves, how can I support myself? What is best for me right now?
Mhm. And being
Right?
willing to listen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Listen and receive whatever she wants to share.
Right. Yeah. Because she does have a lot to say. We just have to listen, you know? And most likely we don't necessarily, and this is a very big thread between both Kate and I, like our practices is, not outsourcing, right? This is this inner resourcing. It's really getting like super clued in on what's going on. I often think about like when you go to the doctor and they put the stethoscope in and then they listen for your heartbeat. Well, what happens if we did that with our pelvis? Like every night as we lay in bed, as we're drifting off, placing our hands over the pelvis and then just breathing and going, what is she saying? What is she feeling? What does she understand today? And seeing where that goes. We don't need to know all the answers right now. We just have to be curious enough.
Mhm. Immediately, as soon as you said that, I was like, I could feel my whole system just start to soften. And that's it. When we can quiet the extra noise, the busyness, even if it's taking those 5 minutes that we tend to divert our attention and scroll or look at something, can we bring that back to us? Hand on the heart, hand on the belly. How are you? It takes some practice,
It
but it's
does.
really, it's life changing.
Yep. And it really could even just be like, again, like, oh no, what's going on down there? To, oh, what's going on down there? Ah, all right. This is good. I loved it.
So we're just opening the door here. Thanks for traveling with us, seeing where this conversation went. We do have quite a bit to share and really building these pillars of looking at building a sovereign apothecary in your body, in your kitchen, in your bedroom, in your garden, and working with the body as a great vessel of guidance. And so stay tuned. We have a lot more coming up.
Yes. All right, cool. I love this.
Thank you for
Yes.
tuning in.